So welcome back to the Sustainable Finance Profit Meets the Purpose podcast, where we unpack the founders building real businesses that align profit with purpose, and of course the investors that are backing it as well. So today we're joined by the Mattera AI founding team. So we've got Gatleen, Nicole and Chelsea. And Mattera AI recently won the Green Construction Award at the Sustainable Times Rise Awards into 2025. Now, they're developing a deep tech platform for discovering and validating the next generation of thermoelectric materials, helping convert waste heat into usable electricity. In the next 25 minutes, we'll break down the technology into plain English and how they found the market and what it looks like to fundraise and scale a deep tech company. So welcome, guys.
Thanks for having us. Very exciting.
Excellent. So, just to kick things off, can you explain in 12 words what Mattera AI does?
Definitely. 12 words are very precise. I will do my best. Please don't count them.
Yeah.
But we are a AI-driven materials discovery company focusing on thermoelectric materials. As you mentioned, thermoelectrics can generate electricity from waste heat, or when you supply these devices with electricity, they can create a temperature difference. In a nutshell, AI-driven materials discovery, and specifically for thermoelectrics.
And what is the problem you're solving, and why was the opportunity now?
Yeah. So we are very inefficient with our energy. In fact, 2/3 of all the energy that we generate as humanity is lost as waste heat. This goes into the atmosphere, never to be used again. With thermoelectrics, we can change this, but we can capture this heat and generate useful electricity, heavily increasing the efficiency of all these processes that are so inefficient with energy. So yeah, the issue that we're solving is energy and efficiency, I would say. And why now? More than ever, we use so much electricity. A good example is data centers. All the new buildings that you see being built are data centers instead of offices and homes. And we try to, for example, increase the energy efficiencies of data centers, which we can dive in a lot more later. Yeah.
I'm assuming that the rise of new AI models and things like that have also been beneficial to you guys, or are you developing your own model?
Yeah, so we are essentially developing our own AI models and our own discovery pipeline. We are using some of the existing tools out there, but we're building on it and modifying it such that it's more efficient and it's going to help us discover thermoelectric materials in particular.
Okay, interesting. And how did this all come about? How did all three of you come about? What was the moment you became committed to this problem?
Yeah, so I did my PhD in computational material science. And I was annoyed by how slow the process is of discovering new materials. So we kind of had this idea in our heads that AI can help solve this issue, identifying exciting candidates a lot quicker. So we came together and we really hit it off, and we decided to build a business out of it. And here we are today.
And did you all meet at university then? Or?
No, we met online on the Y Company to co-found the matching platform.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wicked. So wait, was you part of YC then, or just on the matchmaking?
Yeah, just match made.
Oh, okay. Wicked. And how was that process? Did you find it useful?
I'd say it's more difficult than Hinge, but have essays of text, and it's one reason it takes a bit longer because you're trying to read through everything. But I actually met Chelsea first, then we met Neffel. So I say it was successful for us because we made a company from it, but we didn't actually go through YC.
Maybe in the future though, right? Yeah, you never know. And what made this a company opportunity versus like a research project? Did you start researching at a university first, and then what made you pivot into seeing the commercial opportunity?
Yeah, definitely. I think what sets us apart from just the research project, even though we are very heavy on R&D, is the commercial opportunity for these thermoelectric devices. I mentioned sort of the numbers of waste heat. If we can crack the code and get more efficient versions of these thermoelectrics, you have a massive business. Hence the reason why we went down this route and not sort of a research project.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And historically, what has been the bottleneck?
Yeah. In terms of in terms of the discovery.
Yeah, in terms of this technology that you're developing, what has been the bottleneck and stop these new materials coming to market?
Yeah,
previously.
So the classic sort of R&D cycle is that a chemist comes up with a novel material. We then do lab tests and theoretical modeling, and with that knowledge, the chemist goes to the next iteration. In essence, this is a trial and error approach where the entire sort of speed and quality of the discovery is dictated by the chemist. we move away from that and leverage compute as sort of the leading way forward. So we scan a very broad range of different materials, essentially, calculate their properties, and then give them to the chemist and say, hey, we know these materials have very exciting properties. Can you try and synthesize them and make them in the lab?
And what would you say changed the market to be ready for the solution that you've got now? So who is the customer? Who are you selling this to?
Yeah. Sorry, I answered a lot of questions there. But yeah, right now, the issue of energy consumption being more sustainable, as you probably know yourself, is becomes very relevant, right? We eventually run out of natural resources such as oil and gas. The other thing is that we produce a lot of CO2 emissions. So we want to be more sustainable on a day-to-day life with everything that we do as humanity. So I think finally we're there, that our eyes are wide open and that we understand that we need better solutions. And now is the right time for these devices to flood into the market and raise the efficiency basically.
And no, it's really interesting. And with regards to the thermoelectrics, 101, what makes a material good at converting heat into electricity?
Do you want to answer? Or?
Yeah, sure. So basically, thermoelectric materials operate on a principle called the Seebeck effect. So essentially what it does is it takes a difference of heat. So you add a hot side and a cold side of this material, and that heat energy gets converted into electrical energy. And that then allows you to basically convert your heat energy into electrical energy, basically turning heat waste back into reusable electricity for different organizations.
Okay. And obviously walk through the flow, like how does it actually work with you guys? Is it the AI and physics modeling, the lab validation? What's sort of the workflow? How do you go from using your proprietary models to research different materials? And then how do you envision that then coming into the market?
Yeah, so we basically operate on a funnel-based model. So at the top, we have our R&D, which is basically using AI models to sift through millions of material candidates. So these AI models are generated in a way such that it searches through chemical and structural space to identify materials that it thinks have high thermoelectric efficiency. Then what we do is we use a series of machine learning prediction models to quickly calculate these thermoelectric property materials. So we're looking at things like electrical conductivity, thermal conductivity, and something called the Seebeck coefficient. So these are the underlying properties that we're optimizing for. So once we have these kind of machine learning predictions, which are quite quick and efficient to calculate, we then create a rank of our material candidates. And we take some of the top potential materials that we have from that and then put those through our physics-based simulations. So these are first principles quantum mechanical simulations that actually try to calculate the thermoelectric properties at the molecular level. So it gives us a much more reliable and an efficient understanding of the properties of these generated structures. And then what we do is we get another set of ranked materials and again pick our more efficient ones that we think have high efficiency. And those are the ones that we just then take to the lab for synthesis and validation.
Right. So it goes to the lab for the physical in-person validation.
Yeah.
And then would you then look to license or sell that material on or what?
Yeah, that's a good question. So our kind of goal is to commercialize the material in the form of a device. So step one is we do all this R&D and we find better thermoelectric materials. Once we have the material, we want to put it into a thermoelectric device, a TEG or TEC device. The material sits in the middle layer of that device. There's no moving parts. It's basically plug and play. They're already used quite widely today. But obviously limited by the efficiency of the material inside it. That's why they can't reach higher efficiencies. So our goal is to sell these devices to an OEM, like an end user, who would then put it maybe in their hardware or another application.
Understood. And where do you get the data of all the materials? Is there a publicly available data that you get that data source from and then you upload it to your model? Is that how it works? Or?
Yeah, so we're using essentially two main data sources. So we have experimental data, which is basically data that comes from different research groups around the world who are working in this space. And they publish their data in papers. And we use a series of scraping tools to actually extract that experimental data. So that's our first data source. Even though it comes from experiments and it's quite reliable, there's a lot of noise and there's a lot of variability within the different tools and techniques that different research group uses. So there's some advantages and disadvantages. And then we also use theoretical data. So this is data, again, coming from the research community. But this data originates from these kind of quantum mechanical simulations that I was talking about before. And they're a lot more abundant, a lot more cheaper to come by than the experimental data. So there is that advantage, but at the same time, these simulations are based on a series of assumptions and approximations. And so what that means is that the predictions that you might make with that theoretical data is going to have a big difference towards the predictions you make with the experimental data. So what we do is when we look at training our different AI models, we try and reconcile the differences between these two data sources. So trying to teach the AI models to learn the trade-off between the quantity and the quality of the data sets.
Right. Okay. And would you say then that the data sets have improved then? I mean, what's improved versus maybe legacy data or, the systems, is it the performance, the stability, the cost and manufacturability of these materials? What's improved versus the legacy things that we've had in the past, Vito?
Yeah, there's a beautiful thing coming out of Berkeley Lab or Berkeley University. It's called the Materials Project.
Yeah.
And that is basically a global place where researchers almost dump their materials and their properties. So this has been trivial to us, and I think many other startups that are in AI or drug discovery or materials discovery, where they can use that data to kick off the training of their models, and then they generate their own data to kind of expand their data sets and retrain and make other predictions. So in that sense, I think there has been a really good initiative that researchers want their research to have the highest impact possible. And for example, the Materials Project is a great example of that, where a lot of data is sort of combined, and a lot of other startups and research institutes can use that to kick off. You mentioned sort of synthesizability. I'd love to touch on that as well. So it's great if you have a material that looks amazing on the computer, but if it then can't be synthesized at large scale in the lab, the material loses a lot of value. So some of the models that Chelsea mentioned is kind of predicting the likelihood of synthesizability, which is a very important sort of point that I think a lot of companies now try to work on. You see a lot of compute is not necessarily the key to success of a good commercial material. Synthesizability is one of the major, I would say, parameters that we try to optimize for as well.
And have you got any materials out in the market yet? And is it still very much early stage?
We're still early stage. We've actually started lab testing.
Yeah.
So our AI, we have obviously a right set of AI predicted materials. Some of them are currently computationally predicted to outperform the current gold standard bismuth telluride, which is today's gold standard thermoelectric. And so we're going through that process now with our own experimental scientist in-house. They usually feed those results back into the models.
Sure. And what would you say the biggest misconception about thermoelectrics or waste to heat recovery is?
Yeah. What else?
Sure. So I'd say one of the main misconceptions about thermoelectric materials is that they're basically not really commercially viable, or perhaps they're only used in kind of things like refrigeration or hidden applications that aren't really worth solving waste heat problems for. But that's actually not true. It's just that these very high efficient, commercially viable thermoelectric materials haven't actually been discovered yet. If you actually look at the physics and the theory, these materials with high thermoelectric efficiency do actually exist. It's just a case of actually finding them, and we believe that AI can really help us do that.
And are these like really specialist materials that are expensive and hard to find? Or, well, I'm assuming maybe some of them could be, but what sort of materials, that do you feel like there's, good potential for?
Yeah, we look at semiconductor materials, and the current gold standard, as Gatleen mentioned, is bismuth telluride. Another parameter that we optimize for is to make sure that those materials don't come from very deep mines, things like mines in Africa and China, where the working circumstances are maybe a bit poor. So we try to move away from that. Another thing is toxicity. So we also punish materials that can be toxic. We try to move away from rare earth materials is, I think, the correct term.
Yeah.
To find thermoelectrics that can be made in our backyard here in the UK, such that we don't rely as much on imports as the current gold standard.
And how did you pick your first target markets? What were the signals that mattered most, and what is those first target markets for you?
Yeah, well, obviously we started with data centers, which is still relevant for us at the moment. But the reason why is 98% of the energy that goes into data center is kind of lost as waste heat, goes into the atmosphere. You can't really do anything with it. And obviously with AI models, there's a huge interest in building more data centers that, there's things like grid capacity and the energy consumption around that. So if you can make it so that the data center saves money, but also is more efficient with their energy usage at cooling, then it's kind of a win-win for everyone and the planet. So it's kind of like this kind of like ecosystem of winners. So it benefits everyone in the chain. So that's what a data center is a perfect example of that. There's other kind of target markets of like automotive, you have OEMs, you have sensors, consumer electronics. Like we use this example of a pitching. It's like, think of, your Apple Watch being charged by the heat of your body. So there's kind of like limitless potential. So we're starting with the kind of hair on fire problems where the cooling or waste heat is like the biggest issue. So for example, that data center example is a hair on fire problem. Everyone wants to solve that, right? So I think that's kind of our thought process of target markets is focus on hair on fire problems and then kind of work our way down.
And with data centers, are you looking at, the actual cooling racks and the materials that go into those, that component, or is it just, general, the whole building itself? Is there any particular components?
Yeah, definitely. So are you familiar with the term GPU? Yeah. So GPUs, they heat up. They generate a lot of heat because of the density of this structures on the chips. And those hotspots, basically, we try to cool down with liquid cooling in these data centers. And that's kind of the equivalent to wanting a cold fridge in your house and then cooling down the entire house, which is very inefficient, but that's actually what's happening now in these data centers. So with thermoelectrics, you can actively pump the heat away from these GPUs, allowing the coolant of the data centers to run at a higher temperature. So basically, you need less energy to cool your data center. And that's one of the applications that we're after as well.
And when you were speaking to customers then, what mattered most? Is it the performance? Is it the cost, the integration, the procurement? What's really getting your customers excited about what you guys are doing?
Yeah, so it kind of depends on who we talk to. But at the end of the day, everyone wants to have their process run as efficient as possible. So I think money at the end of the day is what's really driving a lot of people. There is new laws in place from the EU and as well as the UK and in the US where people have to show how they are making their process more sustainable. And yeah, we could perfectly fit into that sort of category where by law people have to improve their energy consumption and their emissions. So I would say it's kind of twofold. So energy consumption as well as sort of the green image or greener sort of lookouts for the future.
And what does this pilot look like for your first project? I know you said that you're in the lab at the moment testing the material. What are you trying to prove first? What is that first milestone that you're trying to achieve?
Yeah, so I guess our first milestone is a better thermoelectric material that's more efficient. ZT, and maybe Nicole can explain what that means. It's kind of like the metric that we're using to kind of beat. Today's is about 1 to 2, I believe, and we're trying to get a ZT of over that, so that the material is more efficient, and so that the conversion is more efficient from the heat to the energy. So you get more efficient thermoelectric devices at the end of the day. So I guess the North Star metric is find more efficient thermoelectric material, and then put them into the device. And obviously at that point, then you'd run your kind of proof of concept in different applications, whether that's your data center application, if you have a GPU rack, or whether it's, an automotive application or a sensor or a fridge.
Okay, no, it makes sense. And how do you communicate the ROI at this stage? When you're speaking to customers, I'm sure it's still a bit of a discovery and still a learning phase for you guys at the moment, but how do you communicate that ROI to those customers?
Yeah, so we did sort of a back of the envelope calculations on data centers, how much energy is wasted currently, how much they can save with current day thermoelectrics, and then how much they can save with our thermoelectrics. For this back of the envelope calculation, we make assumptions, but yeah, we make very realistic assumptions. So yeah, ROI is kind of how much energy, how much money can you save in a year, how much more throughput in terms of compute can you realize with better cooling, and yeah, this is for the data center application. For automotive, it's different things they try to sort of get a return on investment on. So for data center, it's mainly energy and the cost.
And just going on to your fundraising journey, because I know we've got a lot of founders that listen to this podcast, and we're always trying to add value around deep tech, sustainable companies, and providing insights around the fundraise. So when did you guys decide to raise and why them?
Yeah, and we decided to raise, I think it was maybe, we tried to raise twice in terms of we got our first bit of money almost a year ago in October from XTX. That was part of the Conception X Deep Tech Accelerator program that we were on. We had the opportunity to pitch them, and they gave us 100K, our first VC investment. And then like 2 months later, we tried to go on and raise £1 million from that, but we hadn't built anything yet, so I was off a pitch deck. We found it very hard. I've got 150 rejections. I think that's quite common in the founder journey. So then we decided to use some of that money, hire one extra employee who's now a founding AI scientist, Jack, alongside the team. And we built essentially the AI engine and models that we've talked about today. Within 7 months, I think we did it. We thought it would take 2 years, but it took 7 months. And I think that period of building, once we hit that milestone, but towards the end, we realized that's a good enough metric for us to go and raise, even though we're still pre-revenue in a deep tech company. That kind of, we already had spoken to investors, and all that feedback that we got from those rejections, we kind of took that as learnings and lessons. We adapted, we built, and put our heads down for the last 6 months of that period. And then we went on and attracted lead investor, who was great, enough. And they kind of believed in our conviction because we'd proven it. We didn't just say we were going to do it, we did it. And we did it faster, more efficient. And I think alongside the commercial traction we had as well, I think that kind of drove them to decide to invest in us. And then once we had the lead, we quite quickly secured the follower.
Oh, what? Yeah. And how much did you raise in total then?
1.32.
Okay, so more than what you originally were pitching for, which is good.
Total was 1.5, but the rest is grant funding.
Okay, no, that's really interesting, especially nowadays. The way that you can build software with Lovable and other AI tools, I think doing is much more impactful, right, than saying that you're going to deliver something.
Correct. Yeah, it's a good time to build a startup. Obviously, these tools are very helpful and really help to speed up the process and check pieces of code that you wrote, etc.
And how long did that fundraise process take for you? So obviously, done it a couple of months after raising the first 100K from the accelerator. You built for 7 months. Then when you bought in this 1.3 million, how long did that process take you?
I guess from when the lead reached out, because they saw us pitching somewhere, which is also good to do your networking, do your pitching events. I'd say that was about 1st of June. Then closed was mid-October, money came in the bank. So I think a decent period in time, like 6 months, 4 to 6 months.
Okay. And the main thing for you guys is you've just changed and adapted the way that you pitch with regards to showcasing an actual MVP, which by the sounds you built an MVP and you was able to demonstrate and showcase that to investors. Is that right?
Yeah, effectively. I mean, we weren't able to actually show the physical thing because it's lines of code. It's more like the output. So we were able to build it to a point where we're able to come up with kind of AI predicted materials that were computationally analytical, so they were calculations, outperforming bismuth telluride was the current gold standard, which shows that what we built had promise, that we weren't just saying, if we've got this model, it's this model can come up with these things that we're actually decking for.
And what would you say the top due diligence questions you got as a deep tech company when you went through the fundraising journey?
Yeah, so obviously we got funding from an AI fund, and they were very interested in metrics such as F1 scores. They just wanted to see how well can our AI models predict certain things and how certain are they. So that's kind of on the technical side, and the non-technical side, they wanted to see sort of the interaction that we had with potential customers, kind of emails, LOIs, that sort of stuff. So if we do reach those milestones that we claim that we can reach with these materials, are there people interested in buying that? So I would say on the technical side, it was like sort of AI model metrics, and on the commercial side, sort of LOIs, emails, etc.
So those proof points were how does the model perform? What are the key outcomes from that? And then, of course, the proof points from the commercial side is the LOIs, the letters of intent, and things like that. Okay. And protecting the IP while obviously sharing enough, how did you balance it? And how did you sort of, it's good that you had an AI fund on board, right? So they can understand how AI models work. There's a lot of investors that don't. And I suppose that can be also a challenge, communicating and understanding how to communicate that narrative, right? But how did you protect that IP while sharing enough and also communicating it so they understood it as well?
Yeah, I think different investors will want to hear different things. And I think you tune the story to the type of investors. Obviously, the lead investor was very AI heavy. They understood everything. They actually brought in an expert who's now our AI advisor to kind of grill us and like almost effectively break the models to make sure they are actually doing what they were meant to do. So we went through a 3-month rigorous process of that. But then you also had that for the follow-on investors, some of them weren't necessarily AI experts. So one of them is actually a Mattera as a law firm.
Yeah.
So obviously it's very different audience where it's more commercial, business-minded, high level on the technical stuff. But whereas some others want to do full deep dive on kind of what goes on underneath the hood.
Yes.
And I think in the space especially, it's built on trust, right? Like interacting with these VCs, you share a bit of the pipeline that you're building, and I think it comes down to trust a lot. And it also from the founder's perspective, you have to feel valued and you have to feel sort of welcomed within the VC. So I think that for us also played a big role.
Mm-hmm. So you had Mishcon on the cap table as well then, yeah? Okay, excellent. Yeah, so we've supported a few companies that have Mishcon on the cap table, and it's good to see that they're continuing to support, sustainability and impact-driven companies. I know they're very much big on that as well. And what would you say that the biggest fundraising lesson for you guys as deep tech founders? What is the biggest lesson that you have learned going through this fundraising journey?
Yeah, I
Can add multiple.
sure. Yeah, so I will also personally then maybe coming from most of us come from a very sort of deep tech PhD research heavy background, and we always want to sort of over explain all the nitty gritty physics and mathematics. So for me personally, it was really dumbing it down such that every average Joe, with all respect, can understand what we're actually doing. So for me, it was sort of really simplifying what we're actually building and try to communicate it in a simpler way than I usually did before.
Yeah, I'd say I'd kind of second that because I'm obviously the non-technical one on the team. Kind of coming from a point of storytelling, but telling like a narrative. If we're in R&D today, but here is like the proposition, like the impact that we're 2 years away from potentially, and telling that so it's kind of like top of mind. They've had that fear of missing out, that urgency you're creating in your storytelling. And I think that's one of the most powerful things you can do, because if you get that lead investor on, follow on investing, but to try and close the round because it closed twice, is easier versus if you're, it is very hard to raise money. When we raised money, the environment was very difficult. And especially being a deep tech company, a pre-revenue company, we're not a spin out. So we had all these other things and that are factors kind of against us. We were also working full time. I quit to kind of fundraise, and then we kind of one by one were going full time. So I think there was a couple of different factors that you get questioned on. So I think it's just telling that narrative that if you're, maybe you're still working at a 9 to 5 or studying and doing a PhD, and that you are going to leave eventually. I think it's just the way you craft that story in a compelling way that, like Nicole said, builds trust. And I think that really helped us kind of close that round.
Anything you want to add, Chelsea? Or
Yeah, I just echo what these guys have said, I suppose. But yeah, I suppose I'm also thanking for the team because I was still working on my PhD at the time of the runway, so I stepped back a little. But yeah, they did a great job, and obviously you're here to share the story.
excellent. And what would you say is the most important milestone over the next sort of 12 to 18 months for you?
Yeah, so the first important milestone is showing that our computational predictions hold in the lab. That's kind of the process that we're in right now. And I would say that the biggest milestone for us commercially is having a pilot ready, that we have a customer that can integrate our thermoelectric devices and show that they indeed, save money. And kind of running that for a sustainable period of time is I think our biggest milestone, proving the devices in a real world application and making sure that they do what we say, what it says on the tin. Yeah.
And what's your biggest challenge right now? What's the biggest thing you're trying to overcome?
Maybe what I'm going through at the moment would be like the university kind of relations. I guess, like I mentioned, we're not a spin out, so we don't get the perks of kind of going into your university, being able to just automatically access the labs or equipment that you might need or professor knowledge. I think because we're not a spin out, we've had to build those kind of relationships with, let's say, the programs are out there. They're really great. At the Henry Royce Institute is amazing. And they have loads of different programs for people, I guess, at companies like us who aren't potentially spin outs to access really expensive equipment at a fraction of the cost through grants or like commercial access schemes. But building those relationships from zero is, I'd say, takes a lot of work, a lot of strategy, a lot of negotiations. And I think it's maybe something people overlook, not being a spin out. I think that's the biggest hurdle, because obviously we've a computational team at the beginning, but now we're stacking into the experimental side, and it's this whole kind of unknown thing that people don't really talk about is what we're kind of experiencing of, maybe one professor owns one bit of equipment in that university, but another professor owns something else. So it's kind of getting all these different stakeholders to agree to, deals in terms maybe they've never rented that piece of equipment out before and the equipment is worth at $500,000 or something. So they're a bit like cautious. They don't pay people from Larry, you know. So I think it's just that building your own lab ecosystem, I think, is like the challenge at the moment. We are overcoming it. But yeah, I think it's like eye-opening that we don't have a better system in place for startups that aren't spin outs that want to build in the UK and become a leader in the UK. I think accessing all these things, if you don't know what you're doing, can be very difficult. So I think, yeah, more work maybe could be done to help startups that maybe aren't necessarily still.
And what university are you working with then?
Imperial College London, University of Cambridge. I'm currently negotiating with Volvo.
Okay, excellent. And what will be obvious in 5 years that isn't quite obvious today, would you say?
Yeah, I would say that we are on a mission to change the energy landscape as we know it today. So it becomes obvious that we are very efficient with our energy, which we are not at the moment. And we really hope to realize that and to change that sort of narrative.
And if you win, what changes the real world today? You talked about, the Apple Watch, right, which sounds really exciting. You can charge your watch using the heat from your body. But if you win, what changes in the real world?
Yeah, so charging your phone once a month, the smartwatch powered by your own body heat, think of things like that. Cars that can drive for much longer. The electric cars, one of the issues is the radius, right? Everyone complains that you have to charge them all the time and wait for very long. All these things kind of fall away if we are becoming more efficient with our energy. And one way to kind of realize that is with thermoelectrics, yeah.
Okay, excellent. So we're going to go into a quick round. Just one quick answer for each of these. I'll just read it out. So what's the hardest lesson that you guys have learned?
To me, it's resilience, being able to take many no's and keep going, yeah.
And what's one weekly metric that you're focusing on at the moment?
Yeah, improving AI metric model scores, as well as how many materials can we put through the entire pipeline.
And what's the best advice that you've been given?
Keep going. Don't give up. Keep going. I think it took us a while, but we knew each other for a year, still working on it. And then we raised money. So now we're probably in October, we're going to be 2 years. So it just shows you how long it actually takes from coming up with the idea, building on that idea, creating the narrative, the story, actual coding, deep tech takes a long time. So it doesn't happen even with Level and things like that. Not that we use that for, but it doesn't happen overnight. It's a much slower pace of innovation. But it means it's stickier and stronger when you come to commercialize. I think it's just keep going. Yeah, because I think a lot of people give up just before they get there. I mean, we could have given up whether we raised the 100K and couldn't fundraise the million, could have given up there. Never built, never hired someone. And we just decided to keep going. Just didn't, like Neville said, we were resilient. We didn't take a no for an answer.
What excites you the most this year?
Definitely the developments in the AI, but also the developments in quantum computing as well.
Excellent. And what do you guys need most right now? Is it customers, strategic partners? You mentioned about university, hires, capital. And if one listener can open up a door for you right now, what would it be for you?
Well, at the moment, I'd probably say commercial. Anyone who is in kind of any of the target industries, so let's say like data centers, automotive, any OEMs that currently use thermoelectrics today that would be interested in more efficient thermoelectric devices, we'd be very interested to talk to you about engaging, to kind of be on the top of the wait list for when these are ready, to run proof of concepts and pilots, so you could effectively be a market leader in your space.
Okay, excellent. Well, Nicole, Chelsea, Gatleen, thank you so much for your time. We'll include the links to your LinkedIn and your website in the podcast. But thank you so much for your time. It's been very insightful. And of course, good luck for the future.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question.